So today we're hearing from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, and text number, Chapter 4, Chapter 16, text number 9. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
This king, Prithu Maharaja, by virtue of his affectionate glance, which is always smiling with great affection for the citizens, will enhance everyone's peaceful life. Well, that's nice. And it's always smiling with great affection for the citizens. Will enhance everyone's peaceful life. It's nice to have a king like that. Text number 10. The reciters continued. No one will be able to understand the policies the king will follow. His activities will also be very confidential, and it will not be possible for anyone to know how he will make every activity successful. His treasury will always remain unknown to everyone. He will be the reservoir of unlimited glories and good qualities, and his position will be maintained and covered just as Varuna, the deity of the seas, is covered all around by water. Very interesting. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. There is a predominating deity for all the material elements, and Varuna, or Pracheta, is the predominating deity of the seas and the oceans. From outward appearances, the seas and oceans are devoid of life, but a person acquainted with the sea knows that within the water exist many varieties of life. The king of that underwater kingdom is Varuna, just as no one can understand what is going on beneath the sea. No one could understand what policy King Prithu was following to make everything successful. Indeed, King Prithu's path of diplomacy was very grave. His success was made possible because he was a reservoir of unlimited glorified qualities. The word Upagupta Vita is very significant in this verse. It indicates that no one would know the extent of the riches of King Prithu. No one would know the extent of the riches King Prithu would confidentially keep. The idea is that not only the king, but everyone should keep his hard-earned money confidentially and secretly so that in due course of time, the money can be spent for good, practical purposes. In Kali Yuga, however, the king or government has no well-protected treasury, and the only means of circulation is currency notes made of paper. Thus, in times of distress, the government artificially inflates the currency by simply printing papers, and this artificially raises the price of commodities and the general condition of the citizens becomes very precarious. Thus, keeping one's money very secretly is an old practice, for we find this practice present even during the reign of Maharaj Prithu. Just as the king has the right to keep his treasury confidential and secret, the people should also keep their individual earnings a secret. There is no fault in such dealings. The main point is that everyone should be trained in the system of Varnashrama Dharma so that the money is spent only for good causes and nothing else. Okay. But how can you understand how it's going to be spent properly if you maintain secrecy how much money you have? Uh, anyway, that's a question. Text 11. King Prithu was born of the dead body of King Vena, as fire is produced from Arani wood. Thus, King Prithu will always remain just like fire, and his enemies will not be able to approach him. Indeed, he will be unbearable to his enemies, for although staying very near him, they will never be able to approach him, but will have to remain as if far away. No one will be able to overcome the strength of King Prithu. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Arani wood is a kind of fuel used to ignite fire by friction. At the time of performing sacrifices, one can ignite a fire from Arani wood. Although born of his dead father, King Prithu, would still remain just like fire, just as fire is not easily approached. King Prithu would be unapproachable by his enemies, even though they would appear to be very near him. Okay. Text 12. King Prithu will be able to see all the internal and external activities of every one of his citizens. Still, no one will be able to know his system of espionage. Whoa, that's a big word. Espionage.
At that time itself, Prabhupada written without any computer.
And he himself will remain neutral regarding all matters of glorification or vilification paid to him. He will be exactly like air, the life force within the body, which is exhibited internally and externally, but is always neutral to all affairs. Really, that's a very subtle statement. That means King Prithu is really a what you would call highly educated politician. He will be exactly like air, the life force within the body, which is exhibited internally and externally, but is always neutral to all affairs. Wow. Text 13. Since this king will always remain on the path of piety, meaning of always doing spiritual things, he will be neutral to both his son and the son of his enemy. If the son of his enemy is not punishable, he will not punish him. But if his own son is punishable, he will immediately punish him. Oh, well, that's good. That means he's fair. He's not prejudiced. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. These are the characteristics of an impartial ruler. It is the duty of a ruler to punish the criminal and give protection to the innocent. King Prithu was so neutral that if his own son were punishable, he would not hesitate to punish him. On the other hand, if the son of his enemy were innocent, he would not engage in some intrigue in order to punish him. Okay, so he's very, very fair, not corrupt. Text number 14. It's not like, what's his name? Joe Biden. His son's completely corrupt guy. And he always protected him. Terrible.
Give pardon.
Text 14. Just as the sun god expands his shining rays up to the Arctic region without impetus,
Impudence.
Impedance, yeah, without impedance. All right, what does that mean? Impedance, something stopping, something that has a
Yeah, basically it's like a resistance.
okay,
So
resistance.
the effective resistance of an electric circuit. Yeah, so impedance is like a resistance to.
Just as the sun god expands the shining rays up to the Arctic region without impedance.
Without any resistance.
So that's nothing can stop it.
Yeah.
Yeah. The influence of King Pritu will cover all tracts of land up to the Arctic region and will remain undisturbed as long as he lives. Well, that means he's a good king.
And he's a king of the entire
Yeah.
world, actually.
Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Although the Arctic region is not visible to ordinary persons, the sun shines there without impediment.
Impediment.
Impediment. Just as no one can check the sunshine from spreading all over the universe, no one could check the influence and reign of King Pritu, which would remain undisturbed as long as he lives. The conclusion is that the sunshine and the sun god cannot be separated, nor could King Pritu and his ruling strength be separated. His rule over everyone would continue without disturbance. Thus, the king could not be separated from his ruling power. Well, if he's a good king, then that's fine. There's no problem. If he's a bad king, there's a big problem. This king will please everyone by his practical activities, and all of his citizens will remain very satisfied. Because of this, the citizens will take great satisfaction in accepting him as their ruling king. Well, that means he's a great king, and there's no reason to change it. No reason to throw him out of his position. That's ideal, to have a king who's very good ruler. So you don't need a lot of I'd say a lot of
So now changes.
yeah. If he's a good king, then you don't need to have elections.
Mm-hmm.
Text 16. The king will be firmly determined and always situated in truth. He will be a lover of the Brahminical culture and will render all service to old men and give shelter to all surrendered souls. Giving respect to all, he will always be merciful to the poor and innocent. Wow, that's wonderful. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The word Vrida Sevaka is very significant. Vridha means old men. There are two kinds of old men. One is old by age, and another is old by knowledge. This Sanskrit word indicates that one can be older by the advancement of knowledge. King Prithu was very respectful to the Brahmanas, and he protected them. He also protected persons advanced in age. Whatever the king would decide to do, no one would be able to stop. That is called Dridha Sankalpa or Dridha Vrata. Well, let's see. As long as he's a good king, no one will probably, uh, you know, become an enemy because he's protecting the elderly persons, and he's done a good job. Let's put it like that. He's doing a good job. So why would anyone want to get rid of such a king? Text 17. The king will respect all women as if they were his own mother, and he will treat his own wife as the other half of his body. He will be just like an affectionate father to his citizens, and he will treat himself as the most obedient servant of the devotees, who always preach the glories of the Lord. Okay, you want to have a king like that. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. A learned man treats all women except his wife as his mother, looks on others' property as garbage in the street. In other words, he has no enviousness, and treats others as he would treat his own self. These are the symptoms of a learned person, as described by Chanakya Pandita. This should be the standard for education. Education does not mean having academic degrees only. One should execute what he has learned in his personal life. These learned characteristics were verily manifest in the life of King Prithu. Although he was the king, he treated himself as a servant of the Lord's devotees. According to Vedic etiquette, if a devotee came to the king's palace, the king would immediately offer his own seat to him. The word Brahma Vadinam is very significant. Brahma Vadi refers to the devotees of the Lord. Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan are different terms for the Supreme Brahman, and the Supreme Brahman is Lord Krishna. This is accepted in Bhagavad Gita 10.12 by Arjuna. Param Brahma, Param Dhamma. Thus, the word Brahma Vadinam refers to the devotees of the Lord. The state should always serve the devotees of the Lord, and the ideal state should conduct itself according to the instructions of the devotee. Because King Prithu followed this principle, he is highly praised. Okay, he's a king, but he's not a what you would call despot, a a king that doesn't listen to the sadhus and just uh, makes decisions on his own imperfect mind. So, how do we know that? The state should always serve the devotees of the Lord, and the ideal state should conduct itself according to the instructions of the devotee. Because King Prithu followed this principle, he is highly praised. Well, if you conduct the state according to the instructions of the devotee, then you have a saintly kingdom. And the genuine devotee will not try to be let's say, a despot or a crazy leader. He will always act for the welfare of everyone, and the real welfare of everyone is to have a holy uh, country where people are following the principles of Sanatana Dharma, and there is no lust, anger, greed, and other destructive qualities amongst the people. Text 18. The king will consider all embodied living entities as dear as his own self, and he will always be increasing the pleasures of his friends. He will intimately associate with liberated persons, and he will be a chastising hand to all impious persons. Well, that's good. We don't want the bad guys to take over and harass all the good guys. Purport. The word Dehinam refers to those who are embodied, the living entities embodied in different forms, which number 8,400,000 species. All of these were treated by the king in the same way he would treat himself. In this age, however, so-called kings and presidents do not treat all other living entities as their own self. Most of them are meat eaters, and even though they may not be meat eaters and may pose themselves to be very religious and pious, they still allow cow slaughter within their state. Such sinful heads of state cannot actually be popular at any time. Another significant word in this verse is mukta sangha prasanga, which indicates that the king was always associating with liberated persons. Well, our supposed king, Mr. Elon Musk, does not fit. The shoe does not fit on his foot. Uh, he's a meat eater. He's a womanizer, and he is just interested mainly in sense gratification, and uses his money for aggrandizement. Look that word up. Aggrandizement. He's an aggrandizer. Prabhupada says here,
A person who increases their own or another's power, wealth, or status.
say that again.
Is a person who increases their own or another's power, wealth, or status.
Yeah, he's only interested in his own increase in power and status. It's an aggrandizer. You don't want an aggrandizer to be president of the country, but unfortunately, most leaders today are aggrandizers. And that's why Prabhupada says the living entities are embodied in different forms, which number 8,400,000 species. All of these were treated by the king in the same way he would treat himself. In this age, however, so-called kings and presidents do not treat all other living entities as their own self. Most of them are meat eaters, and even though they may not be meat eaters and may pose themselves to be very religious and pious, they still allow cow slaughter within their state. Now, see, that's a very profound statement by Prabhupada. Yeah, there's massive cow slaughter in the society today. Such sinful heads of state cannot actually be popular at any time. Another significant word in this verse is mukta sangha prasanga, which indicates that the king was always associating with liberated persons. Now, we can't say that of today. Most kings or most politicians are associating with low-class people, not really sadhus. And they're still allowing cow slaughter within their state, even though they may pose themselves to be very religious and pious. Yeah, they go to church on Sunday, but they still slaughter cows and eat them. This is the really very, very low state of kings today or rulers today. Text 19. This king is the master of the three worlds, and he is directly empowered by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is without change. Being a liberated soul and completely learned, he sees all material varieties as meaningless because their basic principle is nescience or ignorance. Purport. The reciters of these prayers are describing the transcendental qualities of Prithu Maharaj. These qualities are summarized in the words Shakshad. One second. Shakshad Bhagavan. Since this indicates that Maharaj Prithu is direct the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and therefore possesses unlimited good qualities. Being an incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Maharaj Prithu could not be equaled in his excellent qualities. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is fully equipped with 6 kinds of opulences, and King Prithu was also empowered in such a way that he could display these 6 opulences of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in full. The word kuta sta, meaning without change, is also very significant. There are 2 kinds of living entities, Nitya Mukta and Nitya Bada. A Nitya Mukta never forgets his position as the eternal servant of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One who does not forget his position and knows that he is part and parcel of the Supreme Lord is Nitya Mukta. Such a Nitya Mukta living entity represents the super soul as his expansion. As stated in the Vedas, Nityo Nityanam. Thus, the Nitya Mukta living entity knows that he is an expansion of the Supreme Nitya, or eternal Supreme Personality of Godhead. Being in such a position, he sees the material world with a different vision. The living entity who is Nityabada, or eternally conditioned, sees the material varieties as being actually different from one another. In this connection, we should remember that the embodiment of the conditioned soul is considered to be like a dress. One may dress in different ways, but a really learned man does not take dresses into consideration. As stated in Bhagavad Gita 5:18, Vidya Vinaya Sampane Ramane Gavi Hastini Sunichaiva Swapakecha Pandita Samadarshina. The humble sage, by virtue of true knowledge, sees with equal vision a learned and gentle Brahmana, a cow, an elephant, a dog, and a dog eater or outcast. So that equal vision, or what is called samadarshan, is very important for a leader of a country. He does not have prejudices. He is equal to everyone. Thus, a learned man does not look upon the dresses that externally cover the living entity, but sees the pure soul within the varieties of dress, and knows very well that the varieties of dress are the creation of nescience, meaning ignorance, avidya rachitam. Being a Shaktavasha avatara, empowered by the Supreme Personality Godhead, Prithu Maharaj did not change his spiritual position, and consequently, there was no possibility of his viewing the material world. There was no possibility of his viewing the material world as reality. Now, see, that's a very profound statement.
Yeah.
Is the material world reality? This is a question that's been discussed from the beginning of time. Actually, the material world is Maya, or illusion, or illusory, because people come into the world and they eat, sleep, mate, and defend. They become politicians, or they just are just regular people, and they die, and they never become Krishna conscious. And you can go to the cemetery and see so many people in the cemetery. You know, they have their uh, coffins and everything, and they're all forgotten. They might have been very, very powerful people when they were alive, but now they're all forgotten. And why are they forgotten? Because they were not actually devotees of the Lord. They were just uh, meat eaters, gamblers, women hunters, and always interested in making money and spending money and being basically very stingy, not magnanimous. Now, there are good people also, but even the good people are contaminated because they eat meat and they like different types of sinful activities. All right, so it says here the living entity who is Nitya Bada, or eternally conditioned, sees the material varieties as being actually different from one another. In this connection, we should remember that the embodiment of the conditioned soul is considered to be like a dress. One may dress in different ways, but a really learned man does not take dresses into consideration. There it is. That's a very significant statement. Not take dresses into consideration. As stated in Bhagavad Gita 5:18, Vidya Vinaya Sampane Brahmane Gavihastini Sunichaiva Swapakecha Pandita Samadarshana. The humble stage, by virtue of true knowledge, sees with equal vision. It's called Samadarshi, equal vision. A learned and gentle Brahmana, a cow, an elephant, a dog, and a dog eater or outcast. So he has equal vision, or Samadarshi. He sees these different types of living entities on equal plane. Therefore, he doesn't uh, like he doesn't beat the dog. He has respect for the dog, and he's not a dog eater either. And he sees the gentle Brahmana, a cow, an elephant, a dog, and a dog eater or outcast equally. So he is considered Samadarshi, or in other words, Vidyavinaya Sampane Brahmani Gavi Hastini Sunichaiva Swapakecha Pandita Mandita Samadarshina. A real Pandit is Samadarshi. He sees with equal vision all living entities. Thus, a learned man does not look upon the dresses that externally cover the living entity, but sees the pure soul within the varieties of dress and knows very well that the varieties of dress are the creation of ignorance or avidya rachitam. Being a Shaktavasha avatar empowered by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Prithu Maharaj did not change his spiritual position, and consequently, there was no possibility of his viewing the material world as reality. Now, some people would argue with that, but then how can you be a ruler if you don't see the material world as reality? Well, uh, anything that is not eternal is illusory in this sense that it's not going to be the same throughout life. Everyone has different stages of life: birth, old age, disease, and then death. So no one is going to live forever in this particular material body. The soul is eternal, but the body is not eternal. So therefore, one should have a skeptical perception of the material world, because everything in the material world is changing all the time, including the human body. So nothing is going to be eternal except for Krishna, the Supreme Personality Godhead, and pure devotional service. Everything else is changing. So, in other words, everything else is Maya, subject to change. The one thing that is not subject to change is one's devotion and love for Krishna. That is eternal. Therefore, it says, thus a learned man does not look upon the dresses that externally cover the living entity, but sees the pure soul within the varieties of dress, and knows very well that the varieties of dress are the creation of ignorance, avidya rachitam. Being a Shaktavasha avatara empowered by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Prithu Maharaj did not change his spiritual position, and consequently, there was no possibility of his viewing the material world as reality. Well, okay, the material world, in a sense, is not reality because it's always subject to change. It is real in one sense, but in another sense, it's not real because it's always changing. The fact that it has some temporary, let's say, existence is reality, but because it's temporary, it's illusory. That type of reality is illusory. So this is difficult for most people to understand. But devotees understand that the body is not the person, it's the soul. Now, the soul is eternal, but the body is temporary. This is what confuses people. They identify the body as the soul, and they forget that the that the body is not the soul. And therefore, they go through life with this illusory concept of life. And that's why it says, Prithu Maharaj did not change his spiritual position, and consequently, there was no possibility of his viewing the material world as reality. Well, most people think that the material world is reality, but a devotee knows that everything is changing at every moment. The body and other bodies and all kinds of situations that are always changing in the material world. So basically, the material world is illusory because what is the truth is whatever is eternal. So families, countries, and all kinds of situations are not eternal. Everything is changing all the time in the material world. So it is a big, let's say, play of illusion. That's why it says here, thus a learned man does not look upon the dresses that externally cover the living entity, but sees the pure soul within the varieties of dress and knows very well that the varieties of dress are the creation of ignorance, avidya rachitam. Being a Shaktavasha avatar empowered by the Supreme Personality Godhead, Prithu Maharaj did not change his spiritual position, and consequently, there was no possibility of his viewing the material world as reality. That's a very significant statement. Everything is changing in the material world. Nothing is permanent in the material world. However, if we are on the uh, level of Nitya Mukta, eternally liberated, a Nitya Mukta never forgets his position as the eternal servant of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One who does not forget his position and knows that he is part and parcel of the Supreme Lord as Nitya Mukta. Such a Nitya Mukta living entity represents the super soul as his expansion, as stated in the Vedas Nitya Nityanam. Thus, the Nitya Mukta living entity knows that he is an expansion of the Supreme Nitya or eternal Supreme Personality Godhead. Being in such a position, he sees the material world as with a different vision. The living entity who is Nitya Bada, or eternally conditioned, sees the material varieties as being actually different from one another. In this connection, we should remember that the embodiment of the conditioned soul is considered to be like a dress. One may dress in different ways, but a really learned man does not take dresses into consideration. As stated in Bhagavad Gita 5:18, Vidya Vinaya Sampannin, Ramani Gavihastini Sunichaiva Swapakicha Pandita Samadarshina. That last phrase, Pandita Samadarshina. Samadarshi means seeing with equal vision. That is a real Pandit. The humble sage, by virtue of true knowledge, sees with equal vision a learned and gentle Brahmana, a cow, an elephant, a dog, and a dog eater, or outcast. So, what does it mean to see with equal vision? Well, anything or anyone that has, life should be respected. That means from the ant right up to the pure devotee, including the demons. So the devotee has this equal vision, or he's samadarshi, he sees with equal vision. So he treats everyone with gentle and uh, respectfulness, and does not uh, divide up uh, uh, people like the Nazis. The Nazis, they divided up people. They said that the Jews are bad, but only the Teutonic people are good. Although Hitler himself didn't look like a Teutonic person. Teutonic person is supposed to be tall, have blue eyes, and fair complexion, and be very strong. Uh, Hitler did not have those qualities. He was not. He was not really tall. He didn't have a very fair, color of his skin and so forth. So although he was always talking about the what you call Ubermensch, that's uh, a uh, a uh, means a superior human being. And the ideal superior being is, according to Hitler, was very tall and having blue eyes and fair complexion, etc. But Hitler himself did not fit that those qualities. So the Ubermensch, the supreme or superior person, was the ideal of the Nazis. Right? Now, whenever there was, let's say, competitions, just like every couple of years you have these big competitions where people are running, or people are get a javelin and go over a big stick, right, and so forth. So, but what happened? Hitler and the Nazis, they were always concerned about producing the Ubermensch, the highly qualified human being, but material qualification. So they were very much involved in competitions like racing and different types of competitions to prove that the Nazi human man was a Übermensch, a superior person. But yet, the German sportsmen were often defeated by American black guys that would come and win races and win the different you know what do you call them, the competitions. So that was a little bit of an embarrassment for the Nazis. Okay, so what is our takeaway today? Well, this verse, Vidya Vinaya Sampane, Brahmani Gabihastini, Sunichaiva Swapakecha, Pandita Samadarshina. The humble sage, by virtue of true knowledge, sees with equal vision a learned and gentle Brahmana, a cow, an elephant, a dog, and a dog eater or outcast. So they have Samadarshi vision. The real Pandita has Samadarshi vision. He sees all these different forms of living entities equally. Thus, the learned man does not look upon the dresses that externally cover the living entity, but sees the pure soul within the varieties of dress and knowledge, and knows very well that the varieties of dress are the creation of ignorance, avidya rachitam. Being a Shaktavasha avatar empowered by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Pritha Maharaj did not change his spiritual position, and consequently, there was no possibility of his viewing the material world as reality. Now, this is a very, very profound statement. Actually, people just have different dresses, meaning their body is always changing from childhood to uh, um, um, and being a child or being a, uh, in different levels of life. There's always changing of the body. So one cannot say, I am this body. If someone says, I am this body, and 99% of the population of the world believes I am this body, then you can ask a question, which body are you talking about? The one when you were born, the one when you're 6 years old, or 20 years old, or 50 years old, or 90 years old? The body is always changing. So you cannot say, I am this body. I can ask you, okay, which body are you talking about? Right? So if we accept the fact that I am not this body, then we have to ask the question, if I'm not this body, then what am I? I am the soul that witnesses all the changes of the body. The soul is never changed. It's eternal. So that's who I am. That soul that is never changing. We might think that we're changing, but the soul is always eternal. It cannot be changed. That is not taught in schools. That is not, in other words, part of the curriculum. And the Nazis were a good example of the misunderstanding of life. They were trying to create what's called the Übermensch, the super being. But their concept of the super being was someone who was highly athletic, was tall, had blue eyes, blonde hair, and was very strong physically, and so forth. But if you look at society, most people are not like that. Yeah, there are some people like that, but most people are not like that. So that's not the criterion to look for in a human being. The real right criterion to see in a human being is to see if they are gentle, they're kind, they're submissive to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and treat all others with respect, not seeing the body, but seeing the soul that animates the body with consciousness. So then you become a real person, because you understand that the body is just a temporary thing, but the good behavior of someone who is Krishna conscious, that's an eternal thing. That's an eternal benefit that one has. Any devotional service that one performs becomes an eternal benefit that can never be taken away from that person. So if you only do 1% of Krishna consciousness in this lifetime, it guarantees another human birth in the next life. And you because you only did 1% in the previous life, you begin from 2%. because that 1% is an eternal asset. It can never be taken away from you. That is real knowledge and real way to see life. So whatever we can do in this life for Krishna consciousness, we should understand becomes an eternal asset. And life after life, we can keep building up that asset by good behavior and always being engaged in Krishna conscious activities until we are liberated by our good behavior. And what does good behavior mean? Meaning that we actually follow the rules and regulations of Krishna consciousness. No meat eating, no gambling, no illicit sex, no intoxication, and always engaged in devotional service of the Lord with love and devotion. So, there are many people that are doing service, but not necessarily with love and devotion. If we have genuine love and devotion for Krishna, then we are a real person. If we're simply a good politician or a good athlete or a good, let's say, a good thinker or philosopher or whatever, all those things are temporary. But if we are a genuine devotee, always engaged in the devotional service of the Lord, whether we're rich or poor or whatever, that is an internal asset. And we will be eventually liberated by taking that position as the eternal servant of the Lord. Okay, so also it's very important to be Pandita Samadarshina, a real Pandit or a real, let's say, philosopher and devotee, sees with equal vision. So he does not discriminate between Black people and white people, or tall people and short people, or by the color of their skin, etc. He looks at the soul of the person, not exactly the body of the person. So the humble sage, by virtue of true knowledge, sees with equal vision a learned and gentle Brahmana, a cow, an elephant, a dog, and a dog eater or outcast. So he has equal vision. That is Samadarshi. That should be the culture of devotees, to be Samadarshi, seeing everyone with equal vision. Thus, a learned man does not look upon the dresses that externally cover the living entity, but sees the pure soul within the varieties of dress, and knows very well that the varieties of dress are the creation of ignorance or avidya rachitam. Being a Shaktavish avatar empowered by the Supreme Personified Godhead, Prita Maharaj did not change his spiritual position, and consequently there was no possibility of his viewing the material world as reality. All right, so that is our takeaway today. The learned man does not look upon the dresses that externally cover the living entity, but sees the pure soul within the varieties of dress, and knows very well that the varieties of dress are the creation of ignorance or avidya rachitam. That should be our vision in life. So there is the Nitya Mukta and the Nitya Bada. The Nitya Mukta is the living entity that knows that he is an expansion of the Supreme Eternal or Krishna. Being in such a position, he sees the material world with a different vision. The living entity who is Nitya Bada, or eternally conditioned, sees the material varieties as being actually different from one another. In this connection, we should remember that the embodiment of the conditioned soul is considered to be like a dress. One may dress in different ways, but a really learned man does not take dresses into consideration. Yeah, why? Because he sees the soul, he doesn't see the body. The body is always changing, but the soul is always one, and it doesn't change, it's eternal. So, therefore, a genuine devotee has does not have body to body relationships. A genuine devotee has soul to soul relationships. There's a major difference. That's why Prabhupada says, we should remember that the embodiment of the conditioned soul is considered to be like a dress. One may dress in different ways, but a really learned man does not take dresses into consideration. Okay, that is our takeaway today. We should develop what is called Pandita Samadarshana. The humble sage, by virtue of true knowledge, sees with equal vision a learned and gentle Brahmana, a cow, an elephant, a dog, and a dog eater or outcast. So developing this Samadarshi vision puts us on the level of being a real pundit, real knower of what is reality and what is illusion. Okay, any questions? Any questions from the outside world? Oh, yeah.
One question, Maharaj. As you have mentioned, genuine devotee will have a soul to soul relationship rather than body to body. So as a neophyte, we can understand and try to practice, but it's not like always. But most of the time, it's not like we are dealing in soul to soul relationship. Is many times the features or the dealings of the person comes in between. So how not to get affected by those like bodily features or the body relationship, and how to focus more on soul to soul relationship, like in our day-to-day dealings, even within the devotees, how to stress on that more.
See, the biggest mistake that we make in life, and it begins very early in life, is to believe I am this body. Okay? Most people go through life believing I am this body. It takes a lot of education to understand I am not this body. Even though we see the body changing all the time, but still we adamantly are connected to the body by ignorance. But if we understand I'm not this body, all right, then what am I? Well, someone might say, well, if I'm not this body, I may as well commit suicide. No, that's not the conclusion to come to. The conclusion to come to is to understand I'm not this body, but therefore, who owns the body? Krishna owns the body. Therefore, we don't have a right to annihilate the body or hurt the body. Why? Because Krishna can act through our body in Krishna consciousness. So, therefore, who am I exactly? I'm the eternal servant of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna. And my body belongs to Krishna. My body is made of Krishna's energy. And my soul is part and parcel of Krishna. So therefore, I should only use my body in the service of the Lord, knowing very well that I'm not the owner of the body. And Krishna is the owner of the body. And Krishna has a plan for this body. There's a plan for everyone. If we understand like that, then we can spend our whole life in Krishna consciousness. But if we develop false concepts of, well, this body is better than this other body, and then, like the Nazis, they thought that they were going to create a Superman, Ubermensch, as they say in uh, their their language. Well, the real Ubermensch, the Superman, is Prabhupada. He's a pure devotee, right? That means he's a superior human being, but not on the material platform, on the spiritual platform. The Nazis were trying to make a Superman on the material platform, and it fails. But you can create a, let's say, a super living being on the spiritual platform, because now that person will treat an ant equally as a saint and will not engage in any type of sense gratification, but always use the senses in the service of Krishna. That's a real person. And he understands that the body belongs to Krishna, the senses belong to Krishna. Therefore, he should only be engaged in activities that are connected to Krishna. And through surrender and humility and dedication, one can eventually develop love for Krishna and be qualified to go back to Godhead. If someone is puffed up with, I am this body, they're never going to be able to go back to Godhead. But if they identify with the soul in the body, that and understand that the soul is part and parcel of Krishna. See, we are never separated from Krishna, but we can be in ignorance and not be cognizant of our relationship with Krishna. Then we live a very dangerous life and we die in ignorance. But a person who understands that he's part and parcel of Krishna, that means that his duty is to be engaged always in the service of Krishna. That's real knowledge. That's real education. And that type of education is not taught in schools. They don't teach like that. Most schools, they teach you, I am this body, so you have to take care of the body. But in spiritual life, you learn that I am not this body. Okay. I shouldn't in any way hurt the body, but I should only use it in devotional service, not anything else. But most kids, by the time they get into high school, they're completely overwhelmed by sense gratification and thinking, I am this body. And there's competition. And sometimes you have young people, even young devotees, they get mentally disturbed because they see that other people have better bodies than they do, and they can't compete for sense gratification. So they become very, very morose and they develop mental problems. Hare Krishna. So the word kutastha, meaning without change, is also very significant. There are two kinds of living entities, nitya mukta and nitya baddha. A nitya mukta never forgets his position as the eternal servant of the Supreme Personality of God. One who does not forget this position and knows that he is part and parcel of the Supreme Lord is Nitya Mukta. Such a Nitya Mukta living entity represents the Supersoul as his expansion. As stated in the Vedas, Nitya Nityanam. Thus, the Nitya Mukta living entity knows that he is an expansion of the Supreme Nitya, or eternal Supreme Personality of Godhead. Being in such a position, he sees the material world with a different vision. The living entity who's Nitya Bada, or eternally conditioned, sees the material varieties as being actually different from one another. In this connection, we should remember that the embodiment of the conditioned soul is considered to be like a dress. One may dress in different ways, but a really learned man does not take dresses into consideration. Yeah, the outward material body. You should not take that in consideration. One should look at the quality of the person. Vidivinaya Sampane Brahmani Gavi Samhastini Sunichaiva Swapakecha Pandita Samadarshina. Therefore, the real Pandit has equal vision. He sees all living entities in the following way. The humble sage, by virtue of true knowledge, sees with equal vision a learned and gentle Brahmana, a cow, an elephant, a dog, and a dog eater or outcast. So that's real vision. That's the vision of a devotee. Thus, the learned man does not look upon the dresses that externally cover the living entity, but sees the pure soul within the varieties of dress, and knows very well that the varieties of dress are the creation of ignorance, avidya rachitam. Being a Shaktavish avatar, empowered by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Prita Maharaj did not change his spiritual position, and consequently, there was no possibility of his viewing the material world as reality. Yeah, the material world is a temporary reality. It's not an eternal reality. And therefore, we do not become attached to temporary realities. But in any case, we always engage in devotional service. That is eternal. Engaging in all other kinds of services, altruistic services, and so forth, all those things are temporary. But engaging in devotional service is eternal service. Therefore, a devotee takes up devotional service, knowing very well that all other services are temporary and will not lead to anything of real consequence. But the service that we render to Krishna is eternal. That's what we should be engaged in. So thank you very much. And this is our takeaway today. Pandita Samadarshina, being able to see with equal vision. A learned and gentle Brahmana, a cow, an elephant, a dog, and dog eater, or an outcast. We should treat everyone with respect and understand that they're all sons or daughters of Krishna. They all come originally from Krishna. They may know it or they may not know it, but that doesn't change who they actually are. So most people don't really know who they actually are. It takes a long time to understand who I am and what am I really meant to do in life. Some people never figure that out. They might be very popular as a movie star, or very rich as a businessman, or very powerful like a wrestler or a athletic person, and so forth. But that's not who they are really. So that's the whole point. Who am I? People are struggling with this question. Who am I? And what am I really meant to do in life? Those are the two real questions people have. Well, some people never even ask those questions. But a real person will ask the question, who am I and what am I really meant to do in this life? Well, who am I? At the present moment, I'm a Nitya Bada, or eternally conditioned. But with knowledge and dedication, I can become a Nitya Mukta, a living entity that knows that he is an expansion of the Supreme Nitya, or the eternal Supreme Personality of Godhead. That's who I actually am. Being in such a position, he sees the material world with a different vision. The living entity is Nitya Bada, or eternally conditioned, sees the material varieties as being actually different from one another. In this connection, we should remember that the embodiment of the conditioned soul is considered to be like a dress. One may dress in different ways, but a really learned man does not take dresses into consideration. Thus, a learned man does not look upon the dresses that externally cover the living entity, but sees the pure soul within the varieties of dress and knows very well that the varieties of dress are the creation of ignorance. Okay, so we are all eternal servants of Krishna. That's who we actually are. When we forget it, then we become overwhelmed by illusion and Maya. If we remember it and act in that position, we become free of illusory things and we engage only in devotional service with love and devotion for the Lord. Yeah, the Nitya Mukta devotee, the eternally liberated devotee, knows that he is an expansion of the Supreme Nitya, or the eternal Supreme Personality of Godhead. So someone might say, "Oh no, I come from this family, or I come from this race, or I come from this neighborhood." All those are false identifications. But the Nitya Mukta knows that he is an expansion of the Supreme Nitya, the eternal Supreme Personality of God. Being in such a position, he sees the material world with a different vision. It's very important. The living entity who is Nitya Bada, or eternally conditioned, sees the material varieties as being actually different from one another. In this connection, we should remember that the embodiment of the conditioned soul is considered to be like a dress. One may dress in different ways, but a really learned man does not take dresses into consideration. Yeah, so one may have a cow's body, one may have an elephant body, one may have a dog body, one may have a dog eater body, one may be a brahmana, but everyone is part and parcel of Krishna, and we all come from Krishna. Thus, a learned man does not look upon the dresses that externally cover the living entity, but sees the pure soul within the varieties of dress and knows very well that the varieties of dress are the creation of ignorance. That's our takeaway today. Most people see all the differences of people, but a devotee sees all the, he doesn't see differences. He sees the fact that all living entities have come from Krishna. Therefore, they all have a chance to go back to Godhead. If they did not originally come from Krishna, then there could be an argument that they never go back to Godhead. But because we all have come from Krishna, we have the right to go back to Krishna. That should be a real purpose in life. Okay, well, we'll stop right there. Yeah, the word kutastha means without change. And Prabhupada says it's very significant. There are two kinds of living entities, Nitya Mukta and Nitya Bada. And Nitya Mukta never forgets his position as the eternal servant of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One who does not forget this position and knows that he is part and parcel of the Supreme Lord is Nitya Mukta, eternally liberated. Such a Nitya Mukta living entity represents the Supersoul as his expansion. As stated in the Vedas, Nityo Nityanam Chaitanas Chaitananam Eko Bahunam Yo Vidadati Kalaman. Thus, the Nitya Mukta living entity knows that he is an expansion of the Supreme Nitya, or the eternal Supreme Personality of Godhead. Being in such a position, he sees the material world with a different vision. The living entity who is Nitya Bada, or eternally conditioned, sees the material varieties as being actually different from one another. In this connection, we should remember that the embodiment of the conditioned soul is considered to be like a dress. One may dress in different ways, but a really learned man does not take dresses into consideration. Yeah. So you might see a movie star who's dressed in a certain way. But that does not change the vision of the devotee. He knows that everyone is the child of God, or everyone is meant to be the eternal servant of the Lord. If they're not doing that, that is called Maya. That's illusory. But when they come to the position to surrender to Krishna and engage in devotional service, now they come back to their real constitutional position as the eternal servant of Krishna. Therefore, they're no longer known by their dress, but rather known by their dedication to serving Krishna. Okay, all these are very profound statements. So we'll go over this verse again tomorrow. Because this is the real issue about knowledge.
It's false identification.
Yeah.
It's a major problem.
Yeah. And it causes major problems. People can kill each other because of these type of misunderstandings of the soul. Haribol. Okay.
Nobody teaches from the beginning like we are not the body, and schools emphasize that we are the body. Be
Yeah.
proud of yourselves.
99% of the people believe I am this body. Yeah. That's why there's war. That's why there's all kinds of bad things happening in the world. So this is the first thing we should learn. You know, it's the number one thing that Prabhupada would teach. I am not this body.